welcome to the Alley Report. Today we're talking with Tony Rapino, author of Soundtrack to the End of the World, Tommy and the Order of Cosmic Champions, and Moon Hill. Thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was excited to do a podcast. I caught your a couple of your previous ones, but I saw Robatone was on at one point. I was like, oh man, Rob's doing it.
Yeah, see all the cool people. Yeah, so you have to now.
He's always fun to watch interview,
Oh
and
yeah,
he's going to
and
be at you're going to be at ZerfCon. He's going to be at ZerfCon, right?
yep, that's the plan.
Nice.
Um, you're also in looking at your books, I love there's just such a variety. You have Moon Hill, which is a collection. You have the Soundtrack to the End of the World novella, and Tommy and the Order of the Cosmic Champions is kind of is like a young adult, like younger audience. I don't know, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that one. I mean, I've always sort of if you talked to me anytime before I published Tommy and Nora the Cosmic Champions, I would have just said I'm a horror writer. That's pretty much what I normally do, just write horror. But this this other creator that I work with on a number of different projects, including Tommy, uh, Anthony Great, he's the other name on the cover. He approached me at one point and was like, you know, do you feel like writing? I have the story idea. You feel like writing it? And we talked it over and kind of looked at the what he had in mind, and it just sounded so cool. I'm super into like nostalgia stuff too. So
Yeah.
the idea of getting to write this coming of age story set in the 1980s really appealed to me. So even though it's not horror, I squeeze in some Halloween
Oh
stuff
yeah.
in there.
Well,
Gotta.
especially anything from the '80s, I feel like there was always a vein of horror in it. Anything for kids in the '80s had that. Usually had a
Yeah.
moment that like traumatized somebody.
I made sure to put in there, and I we recently talked about it in one of our retro days videos on the YouTube channel. But there's a part in the novel where the main character Tommy talks about how he sort of like accidentally rented uh the Toxic Avenger and
Mhm.
watched the opening scene. Have you seen the movie?
Oh yeah, it's been years, but I saw it way too young because there was a cartoon for children. So like
Yes.
I got to rent that as a child because they're like, well, there's a cartoon at this house. I saw RoboCop way too young. Like, oh, because it's like, well, there were toys of it. Like, how bad could it be? Like, there's
Yeah,
xenomorphs. Like, how bad could it be?
that was actually what the video was about. It was R-rated movies that became cartoons in the 80s. And yeah, I mean, we rented it. So that was a story from my own life that I kind of put into the novel, where we rented Toxic Avenger, and we watched the whole thing. But in the novel, Tommy only gets through like the first little bit where the kid's head is crushed by the sociopath teens with their scorecard in the car and everything. But yeah, there's stuff like that. And then RoboCop, the first RoboCop with the toxic sludge,
Yeah.
that was another one of those traumatizing. Like we saw it way too young, and
Oh,
it's just seared.
and the execution of Murphy in the beginning, like I feel like that. I mean, because it was so drawn out. It
It they really like they were giddy over that murder. Watching and it was like it ends with the back of his head being blown off essentially,
yeah,
and yeah, it and there were toys, and
yeah,
there's a cartoon, and there were video games. And it was like in the 80s, we just for some reason that kind of stuff got through. Like oh, we'll just change it. Like the cartoon just won't have the violence in it, without realizing like yeah, but when we see the cartoon, aren't we gonna like obviously want to then go
yeah.
see the movie?
Or like what's what always took me when I was little was RoboCop 2. It's the part where they've taken the guy's brain and put it in the new I forget what they call it robot. But there's a part where they're just holding his skull and they're just kind of chatting and these dogs chatting with each other. For some reason, that was what just freaked me out as a kid. They're just like talking where they're each holding like halves of his skull.
Yeah, I mean, I often think that I'm not really sure what came first. Like if my viewing of these things came first and then I became like a horror fan and a horror creator and all that, or if that stuff was just always in me and I always would have gravitated toward this no matter what. I tend to think the second. I feel like it's always just been in me, and I would have
Yeah.
become a horror writer and a fan at some point, no matter what. But watching those movies early on certainly didn't hurt.
Oh yeah. And like, oh, Terminator toys. And then watching.
Yeah, yeah. There was a point in the '80s and even into the early '90s where there were certain R-rated franchises that were not meant for kids, and yet in a lot of ways advertised to us through the toys and the comics and the video games and whatnot. Um, there was famously the Rambo cartoon
Oh
where
yeah.
they took out like they basically had to take out any mention of Vietnam, any mention of PTSD, uh, any killing at all, and like they completely changed the character. And there's actually an interview with Stallone where he was essentially saying like, I don't understand why they're doing this. People like they have these toys. I wouldn't let my own kids play with these toys. This is not a movie for kids. And you
Oh
know,
my wife's grandmother at her house, I found a Rambo coloring book from like the late 80s. And it just
mm,
absolutely makes it look like this fun adventure romp for kids. And it's like this is Rambo.
yeah. Oh man, good times.
Yeah, yeah, good
That's why
times.
that's what made it special.
Yeah,
The '80s.
that's what made
But
us. It was our
I will.
becoming.
Oh my God. But there was so much like that. It was, and when you think about, I mean, I know we already talked about, but when you think about a trauma film of all things, a freaking
Yeah,
trauma film
children's toys and
being made
cartoons.
into
Yeah.
a cartoon and a toy line, it it blows your mind. It was Playmates who made the toys, which were the same. It was the same company who did like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys, and they had that same style and everything. And I mean, you might confuse some of the if you look at the Toxic Crusader figures, you could easily confuse them for like just other characters in the Teenage Mutant
Yeah.
Ninja Turtle universe.
Because there was like, 10,000 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle characters that were never appeared in a cartoon or anything. They just had to keep the toy line going.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, as soon as they allowed that cartoons to be made to promote the toy lines, that changed the entire landscape of what we were seeing on Saturday mornings and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
A
like
lot.
I had the VHS of Dino Riders growing up, and
Yeah,
I remember it would be like a 15-minute cartoon with like 20 minutes of commercials, like dividing it up. It was mainly commercials. In between each
yeah,
episode was like, here's a 5-minute truck commercial, like toy truck commercial. It was absurd. It was like this is purely to sell toys. Toys were first, everything came after.
yeah, yeah. It was all about the toy lines, and then like I forget if it was the F. I'm pretty sure it was the FCC. I could be mistaken about that, but there were like these rules in place where they were allowed to do it after a certain point. He-Man and Masters of the Universe was the first franchise that through the gate that would do that. But there were rules that it had to be like educational and it had to have, like a lesson, a moral or something like that. So, you know, you might remember at the end of every He-Man and Masters of the Universe episode, one of the characters would like come
Yeah.
kind of like talk to the camera and be like, "So kids, make sure that you don't beat your friend over the head with a baseball bat." Like, oh, it's good. It's good. Good
Like, all right,
moral,
we checked
He-Man.
that
Thank you.
box. We're good to go. I don't know. Speaking of like the nostalgia, I noticed that like whenever you sent out for blurbs, it was like anyone who's anyone in the '80s, like was a child actor in the '80s, like you got like a blurb for that book, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that was actually all Anthony Gray or Tony Great, the guy I worked with while I was writing the novel. He was like, working on character designs because we had action figures made for or he had action figures made on card, like hundreds of them,
Oh,
where for two of the main like comic book characters that are in the novel, and he had Stan Bush write a theme song for the novel. We have
amazing.
like Stan Bush is the guy who wrote the and performed the Transformers movie song, and he had like basically an entire licensed soundtrack that I don't know if there's any left, but they're sold on like little USB cassette tapes. So it's a cassette that the USB pops out. We had Viewmasters made with like images from the novel. And so anyway, I'm working on the novel, and every day or two, or he'd like contact me in our Discord and be like, hey, by the way, making action figures. Hey, by the way, got Stan Bush to do the theme song. I'm like, what is going on? This
Does
is
that like
insane.
add pressure? Like, so it like you're just doing your thing, you're writing, and also it's like, fuck, Stan Bush is involved. Like, shit.
Yeah, I was. It was just. It was incredible. And later on, after the draft was done, and we were kind of in the process of the editing part and getting it ready for publication, he started getting in touch with these '80s child stars, Corey Feldman, Anthony Michael Hall, Nicole Eggert, and getting them to read the novel. There are actually videos. We have the blurbs on the back of the novel, but if you go to the Retro Days YouTube channel, uh, I think he has a playlist for all the Tommy and Order of Cosmic Champion stuff. There are videos of all of them talking about the novel. Corey Feldman made like a 12-minute video talking about the
Amazing.
book. Yeah, it's like it's so surreal. When he sent me that, I was like, what? It what?
What is this reality?
Yeah. It's like Corey Feldman just said my name. He's talking about something I wrote. I'm like, what is going on right now? Um, so yeah, that's and I will plug this while we're on the topic of all the nostalgia stuff and everything. I was talking about the videos. So Tony runs a channel called Retro Days. It's Retro Daze, and I write the scripts for all of the Celebrating Yesteryear episodes. So that's why I was like, that's why I know so much about the cartoons that are or the movies that were made into cartoons, all that stuff, because I just did the research for these YouTube scripts. Just happens to be on the top of my mind. We just hit 20,000 subscribers there too, so
Oh,
we're kind of
nice.
yeah. It's I think we started out at it's almost been a year that I've been working for his YouTube channel, and we started out at like 3,000 subscribers or something last July. So we haven't quite hit our 1 year anniversary yet, and he just alerted us that we hit 20,000 subscribers. Like I was pretty happy about it. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know if that's
amazing.
I like it compared to my personal YouTube channel. I was like, yeah, that's doing really good compared to like the big channels. All right, we got a ways to go, but it's been going pretty good.
Um, oh, with Moon Hill, I know it's like with that short story collection, you kept like a theme. You're gonna set it in this area, and the stories are in and around this area. Um, that's something I've never done that yet with a short story collection, but is that something you found really helps you keep a focus on it or the style or anything like that instead of like kind of whatever you've been writing, putting it together, having that theme?
Right. Interestingly, a lot of the stories that were in that collection already existed. And most of them did like just, they were already Moon Hill stories.
Okay.
If you look at the copyright section of the collection, you'll notice that it kind of spans a large portion of my early career. It wasn't like that I sat down and wrote a bunch of stories for that collection. It was a collection
Okay.
of stuff that I had published in different anthologies and magazines and things. And then Todd Kiesling contacted me at one point. This is years ago now, and he was like, "Dude, I want to." I had self-published a collection called "Welcome to Moon Hill," which was just an ebook thing that I threw together. And he's like, "I want to republish that, but I want it to be like a physical version. I want it to have more content. We'll change the name, but take the premise that we used." I was like, all right, cool. So we worked together on it ended up being a Kickstarter program or a Kickstarter campaign that we did. And I wrote a bunch of new content for it. We did like the wraparound. I did the wraparound story that bookends the entire
Nice.
collection. Um, I put in like these extra new little intermediary, I'll call them like flash fiction stories that went in between of this lost reporter who went to Moon Hill and like it was never seen again. But we have these remaining notes from him. So we kind of interspersed those into there. And there were certain stories that like didn't specifically take place in Moon Hill, but could have. So I rewrote them to take place in Moon Hill and got them into the collection that way.
Okay,
So
awesome. I love how that came together over all that time, all those different stories, all those years. To seem like a thing that you set down with a specific theme and based everything around that. Like,
yeah, it's like we went back to it, and a lot of what helped a lot was I had this novella called Reality Engineers, which is in the collection. It's one of the last things in the collection. But that was sort of like the almost the end cap to all of the Moon Hill adventures that I had been writing. And having written that, I had a pretty firm grasp of like why the town is so weird and like why all these strange occurrences happen there. I had essentially the mythology pretty concrete in my head from writing the novella. So when it came time to adjust stories and make them, take place in that universe, it was pretty easy at the time. I don't remember this stuff very well anymore, but we had a map and everything. Todd designed the map for it's in the front of the book.
I love stuff. I love the things like the maps or having like the intermediate stories about the reporter. Just I don't know, it just adds something to them instead of just feeling like a collection.
Yeah, we actually did for the Kickstarter campaign. I'm looking around because I don't think I have any of it sitting near me, but I'm a sculptor too, and for the Kickstarter campaign, I did a bunch of specific sculptures related to the stories in the collection. And there was like a pumpkin idol that I made, and oh, I do have something. This was supposed to be like an artifact from the found in a cave kind of thing
Oh, nice.
that it depicts. Which way does this go? It depicts a couple of the cosmic entities that were in the one of the stories.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
we had a bunch of cool stuff like that. I don't have any of the other sculptures from my collection near me, but I do have one that I made for Todd's collection, the Devil's Creek idol.
Oh, okay, that's amazing.
And at one point I was doing stuff like from horror movies, and I had like the killer clowns from outer space.
I saw one you did. It was the Nightmare Child from I think it was Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I have him. He's back there on the bookshelf. He's yeah. That was probably the hardest one I ever did. Not in terms of the sculpture itself, but in terms of like the casting and then putting together because I had to cast it in a bunch of different pieces. It was I think 4 or 5 separate pieces that had to be glued together. Um
uh,
so I never made that one again because of the difficulty level of it. But yeah, there's probably like 20 or 30 of them in existence uh that were sold years and years ago.
yeah, I love the. I was looking at all the different sculptures. I especially love like I saw the pumpkin idol and I saw Sam's candy they took a bite out of his little weapon. Um,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's what's all. I just think it's neat having a thing like it's like you have multiple ways of expressing your art. You have your writing and you have sculpture.
I I kind of need that. Like, I don't know about you, but like as much as I love writing, there are certain days, some days I can't. Like,
Yeah.
it's just you're not feeling it. And like to be able to like say, okay, well, if I'm not writing, I can go and like play with some clay, or have do you have another like outlet?
Yep.
Guitar. There you go.
That's me. That's my other outlet. Like,
Where's my guitar? He's over there.
oh, nice. Yeah, music is a huge like one of those things I don't know which I feel like I could almost live without writing before I could live without a guitar. Like I don't know, that just is such a necessary thing for me.
Yeah, you've been playing long.
Yeah, since probably since high school. I think that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to do. It's like I'm gonna learn guitar.
Do you have a band or anything?
I don't. I played with a couple bands in high school. Now I just kind of play for myself, just on my own. Like I just kind of learn what I want to learn. Um, slowly rebuilding back. Like I used to have like, the classic multiple guitars, all the pedals, everything else, and then like, hard times you sell things off. So now I'm like at
Yeah,
a point where I'm like, I want to kind of get back what I got rid of over the years.
right on. Do you feel like you're still growing as a musician? Like, are you still learning and getting better?
Yes. Um, I think it's mainly because I don't know, I wanted to learn. Well, like I got this gift of a guitar. My cousin started making guitars. He only made four before he
Wow.
couldn't do it anymore, and I got number three. And the action was really high on him, so I was like, it's like, oh, this would be good for slide. I don't really know how to play that very well, so that became like an obsession for the past year or so, is to get better at that.
Nice. That's I ask because that's one of the reasons. Like, I used to play a lot more in high school and college, and now like I'll pick the guitar up every now and then and kind of fiddle with it. But and this happened to me with a lot of different creative outlets where I hit a plateau, and I sort
Yeah,
of like I kind of knew innately that I wasn't going to get any better. And it's a weird thing to say out loud. I mean, because most people say like practice makes perfect. Just keep playing, just keep trying, keep doing it. And granted, I probably could have gotten a bit better, but I knew that I was never going to be like a famous guitar player, you know.
yeah.
And the same sort of epiphany happened for a lot of different, like, painting. I used to love to paint and draw and stuff like that. I still do. Like, I still play guitar, but I also came to that epiphany. I'm like, I'm never going to be a famous like artist. It's not. I don't. It's not in me. I don't have it. Um, but I felt differently about writing when I was writing. I was like, this feels like something I can continually get better at, and it's
Yeah.
something I feel like I excel at, and I'm doing well. And similarly with the sculpture, I that was finally like an artistic outlet, a visual art outlet that I felt like I was getting better at, and pretty decent at to begin with, and like, I felt like it was something I could continue. I'm curious, do you have things like that too, where like you were doing it and then you stopped because you're like, no, I'm never going to be able to like make money doing this, or do you just keep
Oh,
doing all the stuff that you've tried?
yeah. I have so like art. Like when I was like elementary, middle school, early high school, I wanted to be comic book artist. And so like I was, drawing everything I could, and then I just kind of stopped for years. And it was like then I like regressed. Like I could see things I did when I was like 14 isn't like, oh, I wish I could do that again. Like I don't know how to do that anymore. And
Yeah,
then like it came back like I started like my mid 20s, I got back into it and I did it for a while and like quit and then recently I illustrated a kid's book and that kind of got me like it's like oh I want to do this more, I want to get better at it. So it's sometimes they like come and go, like like guitar for like I play all the time, but for years it was like you said, I played what I knew, I didn't move with anything, I didn't grow anything, and then all of a sudden it was like I'm going to learn this new thing, and that kind of pushed me a little bit. So it's kind
yeah,
of like writing is what I'm always doing and always improving. But my other stuff, it's almost like I'm just switching, like jumping from one other thing to another, like
yeah.
when I'm pushed to it for some reason.
I think there's, and I don't want to speak out of turn here. I don't want to like suggest that this is true for all creatives, but as a generalization, I think a lot of us creatives do that. Like we just want to create. Like we have that
Yeah,
urge, that need to put something in the world. And some of us know what we know, and we're great at that one thing, and we do that one thing. And then others, like me, and it sounds like you to a certain extent too, will just continually explore the different ways in which we can create. And sometimes we hit on something where we're like, yeah, uh-huh. And other times like, maybe we keep it for ourselves. Like I still draw, but I'm not going to show it to anyone. I
yeah,
use it as like, I use it as a almost like pre-writing for my sculptures. It's little sketches. I'm like, okay, that looks good on paper, but it's going to look better in clay. Let me make the clay. I'll show
yeah,
people the clay. I'm not going to show them the sketch. Um, just out of curiosity, you mentioned you illustrated a children's book. Is that was that a cemetery stroll, or is that something
yeah.
else?
Cemetery
A
stroll.
cemetery stroll? I was looking at that earlier, and it looks like right up my alley. It sounds so cool. Um, is it really more geared towards children, or is it like anyone could read it?
I think anyone I wanted to make it where anybody could read it. Like little kids would enjoy it, and then there'd be something there for uh older people like parents and things like that. And I just honestly like, and I'm working on a follow up to it that's the same way. Like I always think of things through the lens of like Calvin and Hobbes. That
Yeah,
no matter what age you are, it is brilliant. And there's different things that speak to you at different ages, but it's all there at once. Like,
yeah.
because that's always my gold standard for like what kid stuff should be. It's like there's nothing. It's you can be 6 or you can be 60, and there's something that speaks to you in it. And so that's at least what I tried to do.
That that was the mentality I went into the Tommy and Nora Cosmic Champions with. The same mentality that technically it's a young adult novel, but it's also really for Gen Xers and millennials who grew up during that time in history, and who will so I was very careful not to, like, I didn't want to speak down to the audience. I didn't want to talk down to them. I didn't want to like dumb down the
Yeah,
material at all. So, um, and I was worried about that too. I was like, are kids going to read this and their parents are going to read it and be like, no, this really isn't for young adults? But that hasn't happened, thank God. Fingers
yeah,
crossed it doesn't happen. Um, and so it seems like it worked, like that adults read it and they're like, oh yeah, and kids have read it and seem to have liked it as well. Um, but that's like that goes back to like the 80s again too, right? Like Pee-wee's Playhouse, you know? That
yeah.
was for kids, but also maybe not totally for kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. I like that kind of stuff. I just feel like that's kind of. I feel like it's almost necessary for kids to
Yeah.
have stuff with things that are going to go over their heads, get them thinking, and like I don't know, like it almost like pushes them a little bit.
There's a real art to that, to be able to like speak to both of those audiences simultaneously, to you know to embark on that particular rhetorical situation where you're considering two separate audiences and still managing to speak to them in a way that works. That
Yeah,
it's not easy. I'm
no,
curious.
it's
I'm gonna
not
have
like
to check out the cemetery stroll. I was I was reading. I was like, okay, cool. Eh, I do want to ask. I was reading the description. It sounded like they were going through the cemetery and there's different tales on the different headstones. Is that what it said?
yeah, it's like notes that have been hidden for her to find.
Is it like a collection of shorter stories, or are each of the tombstones a story, or are they
Yeah, it's kind of like she'll find a note and it will have so it's like her story is just told regular prose, and then all the stories she finds are kind of like these rhyming like funny stories. Like one's about a house where there's a giant spider that's been hiding in the walls, watching a dog its whole life. So now it thinks it's a dog, and it introduces
hmm,
itself to the family like I'm your new dog, and just so they're all like weird. And one's about a kid who wants to take revenge on a giant bird that's been eating members of his family like over the decades, and
yeah.
so it's like that line of like creepy for kids, but not too safe for them. I don't know, like trying to find that line there.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I mean, it sounded really cool to me. I didn't realize, I'll be honest, like I didn't I generally don't look at genre designations or audience designations, so I didn't know it was a children's book. I looked at it, I was like, so I don't know what that says about me, that I looked at a children's book and I was like, that's perfect for me.
Well, I think like it's meant to. It's got creepy creatures on it, and like um, there's a little thing in there like that has like the horns and the big eyes. I've literally been drawing that since I was in high school, just on everything. Like
Yeah. Do you
um,
mind me asking, like, how old are you?
39.
Oh, okay. So we're pretty close in age. I'm 44. Um,
Okay.
were you big into like the Goosebumps and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That hit at right the perfect age. It was like Goosebumps, Bruce Coville, like all of that. And then I think I was 11. I moved to Stephen King.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
kind of funny, like my oldest is 12, and she's talked about like can she read Stephen King and things like that, and I'm like, and wife's like, no, you can't read. You're 12, and I'm like, I don't know. By the time I was 12, I'd read everything he'd written up to that point. Like I kind of like binged it. It was like my graduation from Goosebumps to Stephen King, which I think was most of our generation did that. Like,
yeah. In fact, I skipped over Goosebumps altogether. I feel a little bit ripped off because for whatever reason, I don't know how or why this happened, but I totally missed. Maybe I was a little too old. I don't know, but I totally missed the Goosebumps train. I went from instead of Goosebumps, I went from like the scariest stories you've ever heard, or scariest stories to tell in the dark.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things from like the Scholastic Book Fair, and then right into Stephen King. So I missed all the Goosebumps stuff. I think by the time I hit Stephen King, I probably I probably looked at the Goosebumps stuff and was like, oh, that's for
Yeah.
little kids. And I was also almost certainly like 11 or 12 thinking like, oh, that's for little kids. Um,
Yeah. I swear it's like it's the 9, 10. That's the Goosebumps age. Like that's if they were out at that age, like and you might have just you barely missed them kind of thing.
yeah.
What
And
was funny was
unfortunately,
oh sorry.
yeah,
I started reading because I loved them, so I started reading to my daughter, my oldest, and she just when she was like 9, and she did not click with them. Like R.L. Stein ends every chapter with a cliffhanger, and a lot of times when it picks up, it's like, oh, that wasn't actually what I thought it was. That wasn't actually a monster, and that drove her crazy. Like I ended
mm,
one chapter, she goes, "It's not going to be the werewolf. It's never been the werewolf. Like we've been reading this for 20 minutes. There's not a werewolf." Like she was so mad about it.
I've tried reading some of them as an adult, and I think like if you didn't experience them as a, at least this is my impression, if you didn't experience them as a younger adult or a kid, they're probably not going to be like, for me at least. Christopher Pike a little bit. I read some, I forget what it was. Is Fear Street Chris
Yeah.
Pike, or is that
Wait.
okay?
No, no. I think Fear Street's R.L. Stein.
That's also
Um.
some.
Yeah.
I think I read a Christopher Pike thing. I don't remember like what series it was, but I read it through and I'm like, okay, that was kind of fun, but obviously they're for younger adults. Although I did pick up when I was at AuthorCon in Virginia a few months ago. I could not leave this behind. Uh, have you seen this? Nail biters.
No.
So it this is a pen name. The person who wrote it is Jessica McHugh. Do you know her?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you could see down here like where it would say Scholastic, it says McHugh. Um, this is a tie-in to. Do you know who Chris LaMartina is?
Mm-mm.
Chris LaMartina is like an indie filmmaker. He's the guy who made the WNUF Halloween special,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. I've seen that.
and he's made a ton of just really fun stuff like Witch's Brew and Call Girl of the Cthulhu, and I forget there was a sequel to the WNUF Halloween special. It was like the Halloween Mega Tape something or other, the Out There Halloween Mega Tape, I think. But anyway, for the new WNUF Halloween special, the sequel, he did this was a tie-in, like they mentioned it in the thing, and then she actually wrote the books. There's two of them, and when I saw her there at AuthorCon, I was like, I have to. But it's supposed to be like a Goosebump style, you know.
Okay, I need to get that. It sounds looks amazing.
Yeah, I think I want to say only she, if I remember correctly, when I spoke to her, I don't think they're like for sale on Amazon. I think you have to buy them directly through her,
Okay.
because it's like a super small print run and the way it was done. I don't know the details of it, but yeah, I knew about it from like last, because I backed the Kickstarter for the WNUF sequel because I was such a huge fan of the first one.
It's great.
And are you into that stuff, like the mixtape kind of Halloween special sort of things?
Yeah, like I was supposed I watched that one and then I'd read about Ghost Watch. It's like, oh, this was kind of based on Ghost Watch. Like, oh, I gotta go watch Ghost Watch. And
Which is incredible.
I know
Ghost Watch? Oh,
I
I
wish
loved
I
it.
could have been like the audience that saw it and didn't know it was fake. Like you always hear about the people that freaked him out. It's like, man, I could have been like young enough to like been fooled by this and just be absolutely traumatized.
There is always that. I feel like I never get to be duped. I want to be duped.
Yeah, yeah.
Elford, I want to be duped. Damn it! Why can't I be duped? The
So
like even
you
with the
should get
Blair
into like
Witch.
Bigfoot and stuff like that, and then you're duped all the time.
Yeah.
Every time someone has a footage, I'm like, hey, that looks pretty. Oh, it's probably AI. Man, I'm duped all the time.
Oh yeah.
Some guy found a skull. I'm like, this is it. This is no, it's fake, man. Damn it.
Did you get to be duped for the Blair Witch Project?
Um, yes, like I think I was seventh grade, and like I saw like it was like a TV special, and it's like I really thought I was like, oh, is this like a thing that happened? Like, and then like I went and watched the movie, and I just kept thinking like I feel like I would have heard about this more, and then I figured out it was like, but for a
Okay.
minute there when I first saw it, I was like, is this real? Like, and that made it terrifying to me. Like, it's still the most scared I've ever been in a found footage movie because like I was just young enough that
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was real.
See, I wanted to be. I so badly wanted to be in that like the first audience that saw it in a theater before it like came out, you know, uh that it was fiction. By time I heard about it, you know, I don't remember how I found out. It was probably like it was either word of mouth at school or like a newscast or like on the internet or whatever it was. I found out that it was fake before I ever saw the movie. And I felt so ripped off. Like I really wanted to go see that thing and be like, "What?"
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, it's a creepy movie on its own, but if even a part of you thinks like, was this real? Like, it works so much better. Like, it's like you
I
gotta
mean,
have, yeah,
I remember like the big, the big actually now I'm forgetting now. Was it Blair Witch or was it Cloverfield where all the newscasts were about like people getting sick in the theater because of the shaky cam and all that? Was that more maybe that was more Cloverfield?
I want to say it was both, maybe, because I
Both
remember people
maybe?
complaining about that.
Yeah. I just remember that being a big newscast for one or the other or both,
Yeah.
where it was like this is fake. Everyone's getting sick. All people have to leave the theater because they're getting motion sickness, and it was all very like breathlessly
Yeah, like that.
reported on. It's big news.
Oh well, hey man, thank you so much for doing this, and being on here. Tony Rapino, you can find his books. You can go to his website, go to Amazon. Tommy and the Order of Cosmic Champions, Soundtrack to the End of the World, Moon Hill. There's so much for you to get.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't know when this is going to air, but I will be in Harrisburg for Horror on Main at the end of June.
Oh yeah,
So
this
if
will be
anyone
before
wants
that.
to,
So
okay, right on. Yeah, if anyone wants to come out, I'll be signing books, selling sculptures, selling books, all that good stuff.
perfect.